Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Howdy all y'all. This is red.olaughlin. This is the Talking Heads portion of the USA Global TV and Radio Network. It's also seen on the E360 TV network, along with Roku and Amazon Fire and others. This is a live streaming show. It happens every week, same time, same place. But sometimes the programs, when they're fed to other ones, just like podcasts later in the day, they don't all occur as a live streaming broadcast, but they can be found on those other channels. Let me go ahead and load up the slides so I can get ready for today. And here we go. We're doing a deep dive into nutrition. And it's a program that I've wanted to do for a long time. I've had it on my whiteboard for over a year to write a book on this topic. And maybe this is one of those things that will force me to get that book written. I have 3 in progress right now, so it's going to be number 4 or 5. I don't know, regardless. I'm a researcher, never been in the medical field, never been in the pharmaceutical field, but I love chemistry. I've loved it forever and ever and ever, long before I met my wife. I fell in love with it in high school. But my first degree was in it. I have a total of 5 academic degrees. None of the others deal with chemistry. That's the way life worked out. But what I use my chemistry degree for today is to evaluate and to assess chemical reactions in the body at the cellular level. I look for cause and effect relationships. I was involved at a major company doing failure analysis. What caused it to fail? And well, okay, that and that. And so if you start digging deep enough, you find out there's a thing called a root cause. If you stop that from occurring, chances are you stopped a failure. And we look at a lot of things with regard to the symptoms. That's how they diagnose things. That's how they treat things. But treating a symptom sometimes can hide the cause, and you're making yourself feel better, but the damage is still being done. And as always, this presentation is for awareness and education. In fact, before I jump into the next one, the last show I did on the wise ones, I had a guest on there. He talked about air being nutrition for the body. And I wrote a note down about it because that's interesting. It makes sense. But in between the show, I did a quick check. Is air nutrition? Well, According to nutritionists, if it doesn't enter through the mouth or a gastrointestinal tract, it's not a nutrient. But I think about sunlight and vitamin D, it doesn't exactly meet that same criteria. So I'm going to do a little bit more research on it. But air as a nutrient for the body, obviously it provides a lot of oxygen. So there must be something to be said for it. I went back and in the process of putting the slides together for the show today, I covered A, B1, and B2 in the last program. But one of the things I did not talk about, I talked about whether the vitamin was water soluble or fat soluble. But sometimes, and that's nice to know because if I'm going to have a water soluble vitamin, I don't need food. But if I have a fat soluble vitamin, I probably should take that vitamin with some kind of meal. But what other kinds of vitamins, nutrients should I be taking with it in order to help it get a more synergistic approach? So in vitamin A, they talk about choline, fatty acids, vitamins C, D, and E, and zinc. Those are the ones you should be taking with vitamin A. B1, they talked about manganese, vitamin C, vitamin E, and other Bs. Now, vitamin E, we'll talk about down the road here, but vitamin E is 8 different molecules. But for right now, we'll just call it vitamin E. Vitamin B2, last week we talked about it. Again, vitamin C helps B2 and other vitamin Bs also help the B2. Our next topic is B3. Rather complex vitamin because it's more of a family of vitamins within the conscript of B3. And again, vitamin C and other Bs are very helpful to take with that one. So vitamin B3 is commonly called niacin, also called nicotinic acid. And it's involved in our body's metabolism, energy transfer, brain function, very important. We typically get it from proteins, plants, mushrooms, grains, a lot of sources. If we're deficient in it, we typically see diarrhea, dementia, skin or stomach problems. If we get too much, and this is something I've experienced more often than not, is automatically my face turns bright red. I feel a lot of heat. I feel like I could warm up an entire room. But they call it niacin flush or nicotinic acid flush. But that is the body's response to having too much. And most of these water soluble vitamins, the body uses up whatever it doesn't use, it eliminates through urine, but it doesn't store it. So you're trying to take it for a particular reason, and the dosage you have gives you a flush. So people back off from it. I don't need that. And it lasts maybe 20 minutes. It doesn't last a long time, but it will definitely get your attention. But if you have too much, possible liver issues, gastrointestinal issues, it can also affect your glucose intolerance. One of the things that niacin is used for is to help our good cholesterol, our HDL, to lower our triglycerides. And a lot of times people will use it with statin drugs because it makes that particular drug slightly more effective. But getting into the family here, we talked about nicotinic acid, which is niacin, but there's also another form called niacinamide. Both forms are available to buy over the counter. The amide, the niacinamide, generally has less side effects, that flushing issue. In fact, they make a non-flush version. It's called inositol hexanicotinate down there at the bottom. And it's basically a nicotinic acid in a form that allows the body to use it, but not get that flush. The amide, the niacinamide, is very good at lowering cholesterol, but not all vitamin B family members are. That amide is also good for brain, joint, and sugar balance. We talked about glucose being an issue if you had too much of it. But now I get into another. The body converts the niacinamide into what they call nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD. It's a family member. It has its own purpose. The body makes it. We can actually buy pills that are NAD, but this NAD is also converted into what's called NR, nicotinamide riboside. And NAD is used in every cell of our body, just like cholesterol is used in every cell of our body. The NAD is used to help maintain DNA and a lot of other things. They're just almost too numerous to mention, but the big one I thought was there. Our DNA needs good, strong support, and that is one that will do it. Now we find out that the nicotinamide back up here, get the right word here, nicotinamide riboside, NR, is easier to convert into NAD than the nicotinic acid. So that body's going to take the easier way of doing things. So you can find NR in various foods. If you're deficient in NR, it has a tendency to give you that aging, chronic illnesses, blindness. There's some serious things that happen when you have a deficiency in B3, particularly in the NR aspect of it, because you have no B3 whatsoever. It's not something our body makes. If you have too much, very typical for a lot of the kinds of vitamins, headaches, diarrhea, nausea, fatigue. It's almost hard to say what deficiency what you're having too much of when you have those kinds of side effects. B5, pantothenic acid. It's used as a coenzyme. A deals with fat management. It's something that if you're on a diet, trying to lose some weight, might make sure you have your B complex vitamins there, because there's a lot of issues with B vitamins, weight loss, glucose, etc. So it's one that I would strongly recommend that if you're taking a B complex vitamin as part of a vitamin nutrient supplement, make sure B5 is part of that. Sources, proteins, dairy, veggies, a lot of good sources for it. It's interesting because the deficiency in this one, unlike B3, it's rare. You might have some genetic mutation or malnourishment issue, but in the United States, you rarely, I mean, it's just almost impossible. I would say impossible, but almost impossible to have a deficiency in B5 because it's just contained too many things in the foods we eat. But if you're genetically predisposed for that, it could happen. And if you're in an area where malnourishment is prevalent, very definitely you could have one. Too much, again, upset stomach, diarrhea, heartburn. B5, they recommend taking it with A, C, vitamins A, vitamin C, vitamin E. Vitamin B6, pyridoxine, used a lot in brain development. I get a test every year called the homocysteine level check. I think it's one, it used to be the gold standard for heart health, blood test. And B6, B12, can't remember the other one, trimethylglycine, and there's another B vitamin. I want to say B1, but they're all there to help heart health. And when you're delinquent in vitamins that provide nutrition to the heart, you're going to end up producing a lot of homocysteine. And so this B6 is a controller of how much our bodies make homocysteine. We need a little bit, we don't need a whole lot. Sources, bananas, chicken, yeast, nutritional yeast, eggs, nuts, carrots. If we're deficient in it, we end up with what's called anemia, seizures, insomnia, abdominal pain. It's interesting, seizures, it shows up, but sometimes it shows up in a way that it's very difficult to isolate it to a particular one. Well, I hope to cover that one down the road a little bit more. What happens if I have too much vitamin B6? Well, because we're talking about brain development and we're talking about heart issues, one of the first things that comes out is neurological disorders, confusion, inability to concentrate, things that go along that affect our brain. We also have the balance issues of being able to keep ourselves steady. Sometimes our gait is affected. We don't walk the same way we used to. B6 is best when taken with other B vitamins, but also vitamin C and vitamin K. B7, biotin. A lot of people take that, particularly if they want to have extra nice, luscious hair, better looking nails, but it's used in our bodies for fat metabolism. It's used obviously for hair maintenance, nail maintenance, nervous system. It's found in proteins, dairy, nuts, seeds, fruits. If we have a deficiency, brittle nails, you have nails that keep cracking all the time, hair that thins out, skin rashes, all those things are probably, not necessarily, but could be a deficiency of B7. Can you get too much? Well, the background material I looked at said rare. There's no upper limit set. Again, like it's a water soluble vitamin. Body's going to use what it needs. It doesn't store it. It gets rid of anything excess. But when you go to urinate, B7 is really and truly best used with B12. We're going to talk about that very quickly, and other Bs. But B12 and B7 are definitely a good match. B9, again, kind of a little family like the B3. We're talking about a folate or a folic acid. B9 converts food to energy, our metabolism, our cell growth, function, formation of our red blood cells. It's super crucial during pregnancy. One thing that doctors want to make sure that you have is enough B9 if you're pregnant. Sources of folates are green leafy vegetables, fruits, beans, eggs. The folic acid is a synthetic form of folates. So I'm looking at a folate. I can go to the store and buy it. I can buy folic acid. It turns out that folic acid is actually synthetic, but it's more bioavailable in our body. In other words, our bodies use it faster. But when I look at folates versus folic acid, eventually when the folates are fully absorbed, I end up using a little bit more of the folates than I do the folic acid. And they're saying roughly on the matter of 85%, our body absorbs folates than it does folic acid. And we're just roaring through this thing today. A little surprised how fast it's going. B9, if we're deficient, again, rare in the United States. We see weakness, fatigue, difficulty concentrating, headaches, skin issues, shortness of breath. If I get too much, now we start having something that was a little prevalent during COVID. We couldn't taste anything. Some of us had COVID. But this particular one, if you have too much of B9, gives you what they call a bad taste in your mouth, nausea, a loss of appetite, confusion, and it really affects your sleep cycle, the quality of your sleep. Now, B9, they recommend strongly that B9 and B12 be taken together, vitamin D, iron, vitamin A, and the other Bs. B12 is a cobalamin. There, you can I look at the outside of the bottle. If it is quick dissolving under the tongue, that's what I buy, because that's methylcobalamin. If you're taking it along with everything else and you just take it as a pill and swallow it, cyanocobalamin is generally what's there. And the problem is that cobalamins cannot survive stomach acid. Cobalamin sounds like cobalt, and that's exactly what it is. But you combine cyanide with cobalt, and you end up with a nutrient in the body that's synthetic, but it's not really what the body needs, and it's difficult to get the body to it. So the methylcobalamin, put it under your tongue, let it dissolve straight into the bloodstream. B12 is used for DNA synthesis, a lot of nerve function, blood cell function. I mentioned earlier with the heart, homocysteine level. It's one of those ones, if you're looking at a good B12 vitamin, the under the tongue is the way to go. But you'll also notice with any of the B vitamins, they are almost all yellow in color. You go to the bathroom and you're going to see the result of a yellow urine, much yellower than normal. And that's your body getting rid of the excess B vitamins that it doesn't need right now. The sources of B12, red meat, fish, chicken, eggs, dairy, shellfish. So I'm talking about things that are all the kinds of foods that vegans and vegetarians don't eat. Well, it turns out that you can still get your B12 from fortified foods, nutritional yeast, soy and almond milk, yogurt, shiitake, mushrooms, and some cheeses. But depending on whether you're a vegan or a vegetarian, you got to be very, very, very careful with being able to control your B12, because you can't get it easily from anything that's not a protein or red meat, a kind of thing, fish, chicken. And so if you're in that category of a vegan, vegetarian, take a look at what you're eating, look at the sources of B12, and what can you do to make sure, whether it's through a supplement, that you are actually getting the minimum levels you need, because it's good for your heart health. It's good for so many things. But that DNA support, your nerve system, your blood, all those issues, B12 is there. It's a champ of a vitamin. If I have a B12 deficiency, I may have issues walking, my gait, my balance, fatigue, constipation, a little bit different than what we've seen previously with diarrhea. But this one, because it affects the brain, uh, depression, dizziness, liver enlargement, that's not something that happens, but over time. Mood swings, very definitely, because we're talking about our brain. Nerve disorders. One of the things that I talk about quite often is vitamin B12 deficiency mimics Alzheimer's. So if you're forgetting things, where I leave the keys, it might be something as simple as a vitamin B12 deficiency. It could be, yeah, we're all getting older. Uh, Sometimes you can correct it by every time you put the keys in one place, that's exactly where they go. They don't go anywhere else. But when I get too much vitamin B12, which is rare because there is no upper limit on how much you can take, but the symptoms when you do get them are headaches, nausea, diarrhea, and fatigue. So I get fatigue if I take too much. I get fatigue if I take not enough. It's the way our bodies work. Now, there was one caution that was in the literature that I reviewed. It said vitamin C is probably the best vitamin to take with B12. You really don't need to take anything else. You can take it all by itself, empty stomach, with food, doesn't matter. But they're saying if you're taking it with vitamin C to enhance its ability to do its job in the body, you should make sure there's at least a 2-hour window between when you took vitamin C, in other words, after a meal, and when you take vitamin B12. That's a large issue there with the time on that one. Vitamin C, commonly called ascorbic acid. It's water soluble. It's an anti-inflammatory. In fact, when you look at a free radical, when it goes in and attacks a molecule, the free radical is basically a molecule missing an electron, and it wants to be stable. And so it's going to bump into something, and it's going to grab an electron, and it's going to rip it off. And now that free radical is a happy camper because he's sitting there. He's got his extra electron, but the one he bumped into is now missing an electron. He becomes a free radical, and he's going around looking for another electron. So you have this free radical cascade of events. Well, it turns out that ascorbic acid, vitamin C, can actually donate more than one electron. I think it's 6. But that's why it's such a great anti-inflammatory, because it can go down there and quench that inflammation that's happening at the cellular level in the body. And so from a health perspective, vitamin C is one of the absolute better ones to have because it's a synergistic one. It helps in many, many regards. But the vitamin C also helps our immune system. It helps our iron absorption, collagen, our bones, our teeth. And it's also a cofactor for a lot of other things that are needed in the body. Sometimes this is what I do, but sometimes I help other things get done. So from a cofactor perspective, very critical. Sources, citrus, cruciferous vegetables, white potatoes. I thought that was interesting. And your basic bell peppers, all the different colors of those. Back in, well, several decades ago, over 50s, 60s. I'm going to go back into the 60s and 70s. Dr. Linus Pauling, and I put versus the medical community. He came out with, I'm not going to say an overabundance, but let's just say a lot of vitamin C to treat the common cold and other ailments. And he got kind of at a knocking heads with the medical community. And so some people agreed with him, some people didn't. Anyway, a lot of issues there. I happen to think Dr. Linus Pauling he had done enough research that they probably had some accurate information. Sometimes not everybody looks at the exact same results the same way, regardless. But if I have a deficiency in vitamin C, I'm going to end up with some weird things. My hair at the ends, body hair, is going to have a little corkscrew shape to it, a little twist. Sometimes I get a lot of nail issues, skin issues, easily bruised, takes forever to heal, bleeding gums, loose teeth, weight gain. A lot of issues there with vitamin C that can become a problem health-wise. If I have too much vitamin C, Again, now too little, I have a problem with my iron. If I have too much, I have a problem with my iron. Very critical, because that's where your hemoglobin in your blood gets to everywhere in your body. But I may end up with some digestive issues. We've heard of scurvy. It's the British pirates, British seamen way back when took a lot of extra citrus fruit on board to prevent scurvy. But you have a higher risk of kidney stones. Best to take vitamin C with calcium and magnesium. Okay, getting ready to wrap up today's event. USA Global TV has the playlist, the master archive for all of my Talking Heads shows. Go back there, look on the playlist, look at Talking Heads, Red O'Laughlin, and you can find previous shows that I've done on stress toxins, fat management, lifestyle. And please take a look at whatever's in there that will help you. I have several books that are out there that are available. The Joy of Ageless Health probably follows along the program that we're talking about today. And with that, it looks like it's just about time to wrap up for today. And next week, we'll continue on a deep dive into nutrition. And with that, I bid you adieu, and we will catch you next week. Bye now.